Hello, welcome to the Rooms with Ronald podcast, brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. In 2023, I set an intention to shop 100 apartment communities to see how leasing was evolving around the country. Rooms with Ronald was born out of that experience. In this series, I share my experiences and engage in meaningful conversations with other professionals in the industry as we discuss all things related to leasing and marketing. Join in as we expand the Rooms with Ronald experiment. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Rooms with Ronald. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington, and in today's episode, we're going to talk all things about the renter's experience. I have a very exciting guest with me. I am joined by Matthew Kaddatz, who is the Senior Director of Product for AppFolio. Matthew, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, really happy to be here.
Yeah, so before we kind of dive into what we want to talk about, why don't you just say a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, good. So I started my career right out of college opening a property management company, which is what every 22-year-old aspires to do. This was back in 2006, right at the height of real estate boom, and I thought it was a good idea to start a property management company. I ended up growing that for about 5 years, sold it, and was looking for my next opportunity, and I landed at AppFolio, where I've been here for about 12 years now, hold various different roles, mainly in product management, and through our tenant screening products, websites, a lot of the upfront lease funnel type of products that we have. But for the last year and a half, I've been really focused on renter experience, really looking at what a resident experiences from the time they're approved all the way through their live-in to move out. So that's the area where I've been thinking about and leading a team.
Which I find very interesting, so that you kind of started this property management company. So what are you seeing that's different now than it was when you were on the operator side?
Yeah, so this was like 06 to 2013. I would say I was a smaller operator, and buying a like enterprise ERP system was just like out of reach for me at that point. So there wasn't technology available for smaller operators back then. I was cobbling together things. I have a background in computer science, so I was building my own small little applications for different use cases. Today there is software for the big, large enterprise operators down to the small mom and pops, and so software has really been a huge amount of change within the industry. But still, as you survey renters, so many of them don't even have electronic payment options, which is kind of interesting to think about today when it's so easily accessible. There's still a lot of room to grow in delivering the experience that renters want.
Yeah, which I remember I started in the industry in 2014. And it was totally different, right? That was just when online leasing sort of started to become a thing. We were still doing some, Google searches and things like that, but we were still also printing in magazines. So for our younger listeners, a magazine is, no, I'm just kidding. But, so it's kind of nice to kind of see that change. And the very first company I worked for I didn't realize this at the time, but very tech forward. We were into automation. We were into, making it easier on us, electronic payments. And so as I kind of advanced through my career and went to different companies and they didn't have those things, I was like, what? I thought this was the norm. Well, so AppFolio just released the 2025 AppFolio Benchmark Report, which is full of great insights, but I really want to focus on the resident experience for our conversation today. So I just want to know, why is enhancing the resident experience crucial in today's market?
One of the things that I thought was really interesting, so let's kind of take a step back. Today's market is competitive. You have operators are talking about raising costs of everything, whether it be labor, interest rates are challenging, insurance has gone up significantly. So with a challenging rental market, units coming online, resident satisfaction is very important because if you can curb turnover, um, you basically can keep your occupancy rates high, and that's actually quite important. And we've seen a lot of operators go from really high emphasis on just like growth because rent's going up to really needing to like tighten everything up and improve their resident experience. So at the end of the day, residents are winning right now because operators are really focusing on delivering that experience and keeping renters happy and in their seats. We found, a lot of property managers, 70% plus, track resident satisfaction. That number goes up year over year. So operators are absolutely paying attention to this.
What I found interesting is when I saw that 70%, in my mind, that's kind of low. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm glad to see that it's up 10%, right, from last year. And that's definitely, but I feel like we're in 2025 and I get a survey for everything. I was recently traveling and I was on a flight and I got a survey. Like, how was your flight experience? I spend way too much time in a casino. Like, we have a casino close to my house. I go to the casino, I swipe in, I use my card. How was your experience at the casino, right? So it's like every place I have an interaction with, there is some sort of satisfaction survey. So to me, that's why I kind of think 70% is kind of low. Do you think that's low or am I just crazy?
Well, if you're comparing to the airlines or to other industries, yeah, it's low compared to other industries. If you compare it just to itself, like real estate, especially property management, you think about how many local operators that are in smaller towns that are just operating a 500 unit portfolio. They have access to the technology, but do they know how to use it? Do they know how to press the right buttons to make it all work? Is that actually a priority, or do they kind of have a temperature sense of how their operation is running because the business owner is close enough to the resident? So I bet you if we cut this by larger operators that are in multi-jurisdiction, that number is probably north of 90%. But when you get down, still a lot of people, their landlord is someone that owns 2 units. And that's the long tail of real estate. So to get to 70%, considering there's still a long tail, I think is a good step and shows some acceleration in how the real estate property management industry is maturing and adopting technology.
Yeah, I think when you put it that way, I think for a lot of us, like I've only worked with like large operators, right? Like in the realm of 2,500 and above. And so when you really kind of put it into that context, it does make sense that, you're an independent rental owner, you're an IRO, and you only have these many units, you probably aren't tracking that. So I'm glad for that clarification. And other people are probably thinking the same thing. But I think it's important to, in the industry, we throw around the word experience a lot, right? Like it's an experience this or customer experience here. When we talk about the resident experience, what does that mean to you in your kind of like mind frame?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think more than anything, it simply means we're able to deliver experience that matches expectations. And today, consumer expectations are quite high. Consumers today are used to getting food delivered by a couple presses of a button on their phone, and so having a digital experience is, in my view, quite important and something that allows renters to get done what they needed to do on their time and on their terms. Having to pick up the phone and call is not something that I think the majority of the people renting a unit are excited to do. They're working during the day. They want to be doing things when they're available on their time. And so thinking digital experiences offer that. They provide that. They allow a company to interact with the consumer during the hours that the consumer is able to interact. And so that's the lens that I put on throughout the experience. Are we giving access to renters to do the most meaningful things that they need to do to interact with their property management company in a way that feels easier than showing up to the property management office, or easier than calling on the phone, those types of things. I have a kind of a mantra of, we're eliminating phone calls. The more digital experiences we can build is phone call elimination, so that when the phone does ring, it's something that is a high value interaction, not a low value interaction, not something that could be addressed with a simple digital interface.
Yeah. I mean, I hate calling people. It's like my least favorite thing to do. I'm like, let me send you an email, let me text, because if I call you and you don't answer, then I'm frustrated, right? So that leaves that bad taste in my mouth. And so, but I also think it's important to kind of touch on too, right? I feel like so many companies and people put a lot of focus on the prospect experience, right? Getting them to sign the lease. And then they kind of they have this expectation, right? Like they were super responsive when I had something, I was about to pay them money. They answered my question. I got my application, and then I applied, and then it kind of falls off, and that expectation kind of changes, right? So, you've been around, you've talked to a lot of different clients, and you've been on the operation. What are some useful tips to ensure that that doesn't happen? So that way the prospect experience and the resident experience kind of match and mirror each other.
Yeah, I think that's the industry has spent so much time really creating a great prospect experience, right? That's been time, effort, money, startups, a lot of time and attention there. And I think, within the last 2 years, maybe a year and a half, we've started to see a big shift of the industry looking for more innovation and more solutions around resident experience. And so what I think about is, number one, let's make sure that experience is coherent with what the prospect experience was, right? They're not logging into a new user interface. They're not seeing user interaction patterns that make you feel like you're interacting with a totally separate company, right? If you're filling out a guest card somewhere and then scheduling a showing somewhere else and then doing an application somewhere else and then going in and going through resident onboarding, your lease signing, you're paying your security deposit, scheduling your move-in date, all the different things you need to do in a different environment, and then logging in to pay your rent the first time in a different environment, that can be quite chaotic. And you're dependent on email to know where to go, or a welcome packet that's 8 pages long and hard to process. Attention it's easy to lose focus and attention today with all the distractions. And so the more you can make things coherent, where one stage cleanly hands off to the next stage, and the journey is clear and coherent. You as an operator really understand what you want your residents to do. What is the happy path? What is the thing that, and then you've designed an experience and purchased the right pieces of technology to deliver that experience so that you can create a happy path. Now, not everyone's always going to follow that happy path, but if you can get 85-90% of your residents following that happy path, not only are you creating a better resident experience, but you're massively streamlining your operation. And that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, especially right. as a consumer, I don't want to go to five different apps and things like that. And I feel like, especially during the onboarding process, what tends to happen now, right, is I apply, I get approved, I get the email that I'm approved. I probably don't get a phone call. I get pay your deposit, go here, and then I get the lease. That's, depending on the lease, can be anywhere from 8 pages, and I've seen them all the way up to like 60 pages. And it's just like there's no real like digestible information. It's like here you go and just sign, and then like the management company is like, okay, you have to sign this lease in 24 hours or 48 hours, or the link's expired, and then we have to going here, right? And so I think like it does get overwhelming, which kind of brings me to my like next topic of like technology, right? So let's kind of talk about how consumer technology trends are changing and how, particularly around like AI, because I do feel like I'm seeing more and more properties utilize AI in some way, shape, or form, and how that's kind of shaping the renter's expectations.
Yeah, I think one of the most obvious uses of AI in this is improving the speed of communication and the quality of communication. If you can deploy AI and help a resident have a quick way to interact with your organization, um, that has the right rails and guards and protections, right? Like we're in a regulated industry that it's really important to follow the different rules and regulations that govern this industry. So if you have AI that's purpose built for this industry, you can augment your leasing agent or your leasing team or your property manager's ability to communicate. It can happen faster, right? You can send lower effort messages directly with the AI. The AI can help the property manager crafting the right language. So the property manager just has to approve it or make a couple tweaks, right? So that speeds up just drafting messages back and forth. The speed of communication is where I see quite a bit of value, both for the property management team and and also the like corporate management office, right? Like if you can control quality a little bit better if you're providing recommended text that makes sense with your company policies and procedures about how to answer different questions. Uh, that improves the consistency and quality that your property management team on the ground is able to provide, as well as the efficiency in which they're able to operate. And then in turn, the resident um, gets faster answers and doesn't feel like they need to show up to the office to get it, to get a question answered or a phone call. I mean, I I know from my experience renting, sometimes I would get frustrated and feel like the only way to get my question answered was to show up to the office. I think there's a lot of tech that can make that not true anymore.
Yeah, and I think too, like I feel like a lot of people hear the word AI, right, and the buzzword, and we do all these things around it, and they start to think like chat bots and artificial intelligence, and I have to remind people a lot that automation is a part of the AI, right? So we could, if you're not doing this, this is a quick way to improve satisfaction, right? Is like the automation of your monthly bill, right? A lot of places, the water, sewer, trash, you get a separate bill. It goes onto your portal depending on, sometimes it's the 25th, sometimes it's the first, and it's like you forget. So having that reminder just get sent out on the 21st of every month, right? And like, here's what you're doing the next month. Like that's a simple way to do it. But people, they don't think as automation as AI. And I do. Do you think of automation as AI?
Yeah, so the way I think about automation as AI is you're actually you have a predefined workflow that needs to get done, and you can deploy AI to do tasks along that workflow that normally you as humans do. So maybe it's like once this happens, send the reminder. You can get the AI involved in automating a lot of those tasks and moving people through a static work, a set workflow for the organization.
Yeah. And like thinking about the benchmark report, it's interesting to see that from 2024 to 2025, the use of AI jumped up 13% year over year. So now we're seeing it at 34%, which is a little lower, right? Because people are still a little unknown and it's ever changing. And I continue to think, probably next year I wouldn't be shocked. Here's my prediction for next year that in 2026, it's probably going to be closer to that 50% range. I think we're going to see about probably a 16% or so, give or take. We can take that to Vegas and bet on the tables if you want when we go for a National Apartment Association. But it is interesting to see out of the report that 60% of the use of AI is for resident communications. And over half or 51% of property managers use it to improve resident satisfaction. So there's definitely, like you said earlier, a focus on retaining residents. And I don't feel like that's always been the case, right? I feel 5 years ago on the onset of COVID, when we were getting really high rents for things, we were okay to lose residents.
Totally.
We were
Yeah,
like,
I mean, sometimes it was a good thing.
yeah,
But that's not true anymore.
yeah.
Operating an efficient apartment building is really important to retain residents. And I think you also, when you talk about AI, the technology is now being applied to different use cases much better than it was 2, 3 years ago. Like LLMs have been a massive improvement and a step level change, but now they're being actually purpose built to solve real user problems. And those types of applications are super, super valuable to an organization that doesn't have a full software development arm in it, which most property managers don't have. And so that I think your 50% is, we're going to start seeing a lot more AI deployed. I'd also say a lot of property managers are probably using AI that don't even know they are. And so it's a good piece of technology that delivers efficiency.
And you kind of just like touched on this, but let's talk about the importance of unifying the resident experience and how technology can help. Because, we talked about for a long time it was, let me buy this piece of tech, let me buy this piece of tech, and we started to integrate multiple different tech stacks. So what are some tips you have for that?
When I talk to customers, especially in multifamily, one of the biggest pain points they have is onboarding residents onto 4 to 6 different apps. They have an app to pay rent. They have an app to open their door. They have an app to manage community amenities. There's just an app to deal with their packages. There's just so many different apps, and there's app fatigue both from the property manager as well as from the resident, right? That's a lot of pieces of technology to manage, as well as get your residents to use properly. And frankly, a lot of them are still early stage software companies, so they don't have all the bugs worked out, et cetera. And so pulling all that together and building the right tech stack is super important. What we've seen is operators are trying to consolidate their tech onto platforms that have a lot of the value across the chain. And so it makes onboarding a resident onto their property not having to download 6 different apps. You can get away with 1 or 2, which is much more efficient from an operating perspective, but also from a resident perspective. You don't have to remember what the name of the thing is to do your packages, for example. You have kind of one place to go. So when I think about resident experience, I really think about how do we make it simple for residents to go to a place and know what to do and where to go to get their needs met. And that experience is coherent, it makes sense, and it's in line with the user experience is like similar to their application experience. They're probably not downloading an app to fill out an online application, but that user experience should translate into their living experience as well.
I tour lots of properties, and I toured a property once and I had to download an app to do the self-guided tour. Like they had their own app, right? And so I was like talking to the team about it after I did the tour, and I said, "So will this app kind of carry me through my resident journey, right?" So like I downloaded this app that I can only use at this company, right? It's not like a self-guided tour. Like they custom built this app. And I said, so let's say I decided to apply with you. Will this app then become where I apply and then become the resident? They're like, no, you have to download another app. And I was like, well, I already have all my information in this app. Why not just carry it through? And they're like, well, because that's just for prospects. You have to have the resident app where they can go pay their rent, put their work orders in. And then we have this app for their front door. But then to even get into the community, they use a different lock. So you had to download that lock. And I was like counting and I was like, we're already up to like 5 different apps that I have to even like move in, right? I don't know that my phone is going to be able to store that many apps at this point because everybody has an app.
Everyone has an app, and that's an important problem to solve, because everyone has an app because there's that many problems to solve, but the resident really wants a coherent experience, and so that's something we think really deeply about: is how do we leverage the value of all of those apps into a coherent experience, and how do we provide residents the ability to not have to go to multiple different places but still get some of the value of that.
Yeah, which kind of like, talking about those apps just made me think about, what are some common pain points in the move-in process? And then what are some of the common and how can digital tools help alleviate them, right? Because we talk about all these different pain points. So what are you hearing from your clients?
So the top issue by far that we hear is utility setup. The number of residents that, and you think about it, it makes sense, right? Like people know they have to sign the lease to get the unit, and they pretty much know they have to pay the security deposit. That's pretty common. The industry's done a very good job educating renters that those are core obligations. But utility setup is something you do every time you move, and if you're moving to different areas, this was a totally separate group of vendors, right? Like your electric company can vary wildly. If you're in Texas, you get the choice between 20 different options, and you can't make heads or tails as a consumer about what makes sense for you. And so, depending on where you are, different areas, like setting up utilities, even to know what internet providers are in your area, those types of things can be a very challenging and frustrating experience. And then on top of that, what property managers need to know is, was it moved over to the resident's name so that the resident takes over billing appropriately and the landlord isn't paying for usages that they shouldn't. And so this can result in like keys not being delivered on move-in day, which is a terrible experience that both property manager and resident never want to go through. And it could be simply resident not understanding their obligations, but also just confusion throughout the process. Where do I go? Who do I talk to? What do I need? How does it work? When you're doing something, once every probably 2 to 3 years, and having to do it with a different electric company each time, it can be hard. Electric companies aren't known for great customer service either, or great digital experiences either. And so that can be challenging to just like get them a copy of your lease so you can get the service moved over to your name can be hard. And so helping residents through that process, and making it clear that they have these obligations is where honestly, like I see a continued opportunity to invest technology and help property managers solve that problem, because it's definitely a sticking point and a pain point that we hear on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think like one of the common pain points that I see when I'm working with teams or I've experienced when I've rented is that lack of communication, right? I've signed the lease and then I'm like, I've applied, I've been approved, and then I'm hunting down like the leasing agent, like, hey, I need a lease. I need this. I remember I was moving across country once and I was moving into this apartment and I did the whole steps. And then it came the Friday before my move in on Monday and I hadn't heard anything. They hadn't given me a move in total. They hadn't even sent the lease. They haven't given me down, like, here's who you need to call for utilities. This is what you need to set up. And like, I'm not usually a stressor. Like I don't stress a lot, but I'm like, I'm moving 1,500 miles away from where I'm currently at. And like, I'm going to get in a car and be driving this. I need to have this all in place before I get there because what I don't want to happen is to get there. And then they say, oh, well, you need to do XYZ because some electric companies can't turn on the electric for 24 hours or things like that. Then it's like that additional stress. So I'm just like, this is where I think the technology and these digital tools can help like streamline it, right? Did you do your, did you set up your renter's insurance? You click yes, right? I recently set up a company for consulting and the software that I used literally walked me through every step. And it was like, did you do this? Put in the confirmation, click it off, right? And so like, and when I had past due task, it would send me an email like 2 to 4 times a day, like, hey, this is past due. You need to get this done. Be compliant, right? And so like, I think like we can take that part of other industries and bring it over here and make it smoother because, which leads me kind of into this last point. We know by 2030, right? Gen Z is going to be the largest renter demographics in the United States. And that's hard to think in the 5 years, right? And I've worked with a lot of Gen Zs. I know a lot of Gen Zs, and they take a lot of hand holding. Like they need that guide, right? Because a lot of them, like, this is going to be their first time renting. They may not know what to do. And so how can we connect with Gen Z renters and make sure that we're meeting their unique expectations in your eyes because they have some high standards?
Yeah, I mean it's funny. When you talk about like your moving experience, here's how I think about it. How do you make it very obvious to the renter what are the things they need to do in order to get their keys? It's just that simple. Um, you make the tasks obvious. You make it clear when they need to be done by, and you guide them on their way to do it. So if you can give them a place where they can go, they're used to going to digital places to get things done, right? They know how to get food delivered to their door. They're very good at that. If you can think about it from, they know how to get a car to go pick them up and take them places. Those are really straightforward, easy processes. If you can think about it just from that simplicity of what are the things that need to be done in order to get the keys and just have them highly focused on those things, you're going to create a great resident experience because they're going to be able to do the things that you want them to do. It just has to be obvious and simple and not overly complicated. So this goes to like all operators. Think through your process. What part is absolutely necessary? How do you make it easy and straightforward so that you can explain it in very simple terms? It goes back to, I think you mentioned earlier, like communication, right? Like communication, sometimes we get hung up on the amount of communication and how hard it is to manage the amount of communication. I like to really think about how do we make communication simple. If we can really, and simple communication is probably the hardest thing to do. But if you kind of take your marketing hat and go, how do we simply communicate the value of the property? We've, as an industry, figured that out pretty well. I think most operators are pretty good at communicating their distinctive value. How do you then kind of take that simplicity and apply it to how do you communicate the steps that need to be done? How do you build a resident experience that is simple and easy to follow, that you could teach your kids how to do it? Those are the types of things that I think first need to be done at the operator level, and then you can partner with technology companies that can help you put that into a piece of digital technology, right? That you can then guide residents through. But if you're not clear as an operator exactly what you need to exist, and not as simple and obvious as possible, it's going to be very hard to figure out what technology even to buy. And so the biggest problem I see with a lot of people is like, everyone's talking about this new cool thing, but you've not spent enough time internally figuring out what you want your process to be and what's simple for your market, what makes sense for your industry, your property. Do that first, and then figure out what technology makes sense for you to deploy based upon what you've already established, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I also think like keeping it simple is great too, but I also think it needs to be clear and concise, right? And I'm going to blame the education system, right? I feel like when I was in school and in high school and to college, it was about a word count, right? Like you had to turn in a report. It had to be 10 pages or, 10,000 words. And like you had to add a whole bunch of fluff or like things like that to get to that point. And so I feel like that's kind of transitioned over to us now as an adult. We're like, oh, but it has to be this long. And I'm like, no, it's okay. Like get your point across. My life motto is be brief, be bright, be gone. And so I kind of been taking that into there as well.
I was lucky. My dad had a red pen that he used to edit my papers, and he had the mantra of clear and concise. And the amount of red lines to get to those points, I often would struggle to get to the word count, but I knew my writing was to the point. And I think that's spot on. Clear and concise is a lot easier to follow. So it's definitely a huge point.
Well, that's why I think renting, getting a lift, ordering Taco Bell from the app, all these apps that especially Gen Zs are using, I think that's why they use it because, again, there's not a lot of guesswork. There's not a lot of which one do I go with? It's this one provides a consistent experience. I know I can go to Taco Bell. I can go to the drive-thru. I don't know where you live, but my AI at Taco Bell is now I just say I have a mobile order. It'll ask me my name. It will pull it up on the screen and I go up and it hands it off, right? The human hands it off, but that's the only interaction that I have to have with the human. And I'm perfect. Sometimes I'm just in a hoodie and no one talked to me kind of thing. So, but again, it's that clear and concise and we know what to expect. Well, Matthew, we are out of time. Is there any final thoughts that you wanted to share or, maybe tell people where they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah. Appreciate the time. Great conversation. If you want to know more about me, you can check me out. LinkedIn. If you want to know more about Appfolio, www.appfolio.com. Happy to have a conversation with anyone in the industry. I just absolutely love communicating and hearing about customers or other operators' problems and what they're looking to solve. Those are my favorite conversations. And it's what I wake up every day excited to go do. So love to hear from you if you found something interesting.
Perfect. Well, guys, the 2025 Appfolio Benchmark Report is hot off the presses. It will be linked to this on LinkedIn. You'll find it all over social media. I've been joined today by Matthew Kaddatz, who is the Senior Director of Product for Appfolio. Matthew, thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation. I love the incorporation of some data points, but more naturally, that was just a conversation of what you're seeing, which is kind of what I'm seeing from even just the prospect side. So thank you so much for joining me today. And until next time, guys, happy leasing. Bye. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope I left you with some fresh ideas or a new perspective. Leasing and marketing are evolving rapidly, and Rooms with Ronald is committed to offering a place to hear about those changes. We also celebrate and acknowledge the fundamentals of exceptional service that will never go out of style. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please comment, or subscribe. Visit multifamilymedianetwork.com to learn more about our other exceptional industry podcasts, thought pieces, and sponsorship opportunities.